That the systems themselves are actually good when they're used well. It's poor utilization of an irrigation system that's going to end up causing those issues.
All right, welcome to episode 9 of Behind the Turf. Today we are joined with Jared.
It's just me, man.
And he's our agronomist, and it's just going to be the two of us today. And our episode today is irrigation is bad for your lawn, and maybe that's a big tagline. A lot of people are going to be like, "What?"
Hot take.
But I titled that because I wanted to really talk about. So often clients feel like they have to have an irrigation system to have a beautiful lawn, but so often people with an irrigation system can cause some real damage by overusing it or using it in an incorrect way. So I hope today we can kind of dive into that. For people that may not even know what we're talking about when we say irrigation, I mean, Jared, can you just quickly speak on what an irrigation system is?
Yeah, I think that the simplest definition is a way to deliver water to the yard. You know, the most common ones would be the ones that it's a buried grid of pipes and irrigation heads that are controlled by a controller, but it's just a way to deliver water to the turf grass itself or ornamental plants.
Yeah, and that can be delivered in a variety of different ways. And so it's not really a one fix for every customer.
Yeah.
Like, so there's different heads that produce different amounts of water.
Sure.
There's different layouts. Like it's way more complicated. And
It's a deep dive. If you wanted to get really into it, there's a lot of methods and a lot of
you probably saw this
ways,
a lot with golf course management.
Oh, sure.
I mean, they've got some serious irrigation systems out there.
It's a different world entirely. It's another step towards that where you have, very large heads that throw an awful lot of water a very long distance in those instances. Yep.
So talk with me a little bit about, like, when I say irrigation is bad for a lawn, what are the things that could be bad when it comes to overwatering or irrigation systems in general?
I think that probably a more accurate way to say that would be that the systems themselves are actually good when they're used well. It's poor utilization of an irrigation system that's going to end up causing those issues. Really what it comes down to is the set and forget mentality. A lot of people they set their irrigation system in a way that they don't have to think about it again, so it doesn't get turned off when it rains, or maybe there's way too much water going down in certain zones, things like that. And what you'll end up with is either an overutilization or an underutilization that ends up compromising turf health in some way.
Right, and that's one of the things I think with technology, we've come a long way. Before, we had these little rain sensors that would hang off the side of our house, and they would not really work great. Some people liked them, but I think in general, like, they either cut off the irrigation system too often or not enough. I don't know how you pronounce it. I think it's called Ratio. Ratio is one that I use at my personal home. There's these timers now that are all synced up with an app. Yeah. They work with, I guess, the weather app. But anyways, they work so much better because they're working off real data that's coming in. And I've been really surprised how well it's worked at my house to have upgraded the controller to how much better of irrigation coverage I get at my house, because I'm really getting cut off on those days where we're just getting too much rainfall, or we're predicted to get too much rainfall, and it pretty accurately cuts it off.
Somebody was telling me about this last year. We had a client call in, and we were talking about, it's one of the more common things that we talk about. Last time we were recording podcasts, we talked a lot about mowing, and this time we're having this conversation about irrigation, and both of those are fundamental inputs that the client has responsibility over. They hire us to do fertilization and weed control, and I will make the argument until I'm blue in the face that watering well and mowing well are just as important to that. So we have a lot of conversations about irrigation with clients, and last year I had a client that was talking to me about these systems. I think they're fascinating. He was talking about, projected soil moistures in different areas and stuff, and being able to really tweak what is going out in individual zones and stuff within the irrigation system. And that is, it's perfect. It's really interesting what technology is allowing us to do these days. I will make the argument, probably don't depend solely on that. Use your eyes and certainly sort of audit your results to avoid any sort of issues that may arise that could be avoided. But I mean, what a wonderful utility there.
So that's one of the things I was going to mention was that what's great about the new technology is with the old, you could just set it, forget it. But with the new, you've got this app on your phone. It's alerting you, hey, we turned off the irrigation system for today. We've added extra rain or water to the system today, runtime. So it's constantly giving you notifications of the automatic changes. And then you can easily go in there and make those changes yourself if you don't like what what it's doing automatically.
Yeah, well, because it's still at the end of the day, if you're the first person, you have that first person account of the condition of the turf grass, and so if you see something that is maybe being underwatered or something, as long as you can manually go in there and bump up that station time. I think run times is something that is a really big question that we get a lot. I wish Ruth was here to pour into that, but we're ruthless today.
Yeah.
So. That's we've left the void there, and for this episode, in respect,
A little under
she's
the weather.
coming back, guys. She's fine. She's coming back.
But that was my next question. I brought my tuna can. I've been using this for
nice.
years. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the tuna can example.
Yeah.
But it can be a variety of different ways you figure out. But because we've talked about every system is a little different, you've got to figure out how much water your lawn's getting with your particular irrigation system.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that sometimes people call us in and they say, what should I set my system? How long should I run my stations or my zones for? And that answer is really variant. There's a lot of variables if you want to get really technical, down to flow rate and pipe size and how many gallons per minute your system can even flow. And it doesn't have to be that complicated. It can be very simple, and it can be as simple as an irrigation audit. When I was in school, they taught us how to do this with very specific measuring cups and stuff. But the nice part is that tuna can that you brought in, or if you've got cats, cat food comes in that similar sort of tin. I have cats. So, but the nice part about those is, when we're talking about irrigation inputs and how much somebody should be putting out in a week, the suggestion is 2 to 3 days that aren't connecting to one another. So like a Monday, Wednesday, and a Saturday kind of deal. And that each time you run that system, you're running it, roughly a third of an inch if you're running it 3 times a week. Because a tuna can is roughly an inch tall, making sure that you're filling it a third of the way full, or maybe a little more when it's sort of warm outside, is a good indicator to say, okay, well, I'm getting what I need to be putting out in each of those. And this is a suggestion too. I think it's important to know that in situations like these, when it comes to cultural practices, mowing, watering, the suggestions are broad suggestions. They're good starting points, but becoming familiar with your individual property, becoming familiar with what your irrigation system is capable of putting out, or maybe where it doesn't overlap well enough or overlaps too well, it would be a really good secondary. That's a good place to start there, but secondarily, you should go out and sort of audit your results based on the baseline parameters that you've set for it.
Okay, so as we wrap this up, where do we start with this? Okay, so we've got our tuna can, or we've got something to measure it. I think primarily there's 2 different types of heads that you see in lawns. Ones that move around and ones that stay still and don't move, and they cover the same area the entire time they're on. I was just thinking, you said 3 times a week, but where should we start minutes wise? Like how many minutes should we start off to see how much water is coming out?
Yeah. Started at, I'd say 15 or 20 minutes just to kind of find out how much water.
And that's on the head that's moving around.
Yeah. The ones that are the ones that are stationary, maybe a little bit less than that. So that way, because they're going to be kind of operating in that same zone for that period of time. But a nice average would be, find out how much water you're putting out in 15 or 20 minutes. If it's enough, great. If it's not enough, add more. It probably isn't, frankly, but find out where you're at baseline wise so you don't saturate things, and plus or minus from there.
Well, and that's what I wanted to end it with this too, is that just because you're getting an inch of water, in particular for your lawn, you may find that particular area of the lawn is not drying out fast enough, and you're overwatering it with an inch. An inch is just a gauge, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's
so every lawn's a little different still. So even then, you've got to have your eyes open and say like, oh, my front yard gets a ton of sun, great drainage. My backyard gets a lot of sun, but it doesn't get good drainage, And so your back may run a little less than your front and not get quite an inch. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, exactly. And even topology, how hilly is your yard? How firm, how compact is your soil? All of these things play a major role. But if you're really going to get into growing grass, if it's something that you want to do well, you want to do that extra few percent to take the best opportunity and make the best yard that you can possibly do. Educate yourself. What does a little bit of wilt look like? Because we have really resilient turf grasses too, that are going to recover, but it's, certainly agreed.
All right. You got anything else?
No, I think that it's just important to know that it's kind of like GPS over time, right? With cars, it started off where we didn't have GPS, so everything was manual. You had to manually turn on your zones, and then as time's gone on, kind of in the same way that we've gone from normal sort of cruise control to autopilot now in the case of some of these cars that can almost drive themselves, although they shouldn't. You should pay attention to traffic. There still should be input, even though the technology has gotten better and is certainly more helpful. Input from the driver, input from the homeowner is going to yield the best results when you're talking about an irrigation system.
All right. So we hope you will go out, purchase you some tuna, have a nice tuna sandwich, and have a beautiful lawn at the same time.
That's right.
And we appreciate you tuning in to episode 9 of Behind the Turf. And if you have any questions, we hope you'll reach out to us.